Hey everyone, you're watching Automating with Fuga Part 2. In this part of the tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to ask the user what they would like to name their final exported student ID cards, and then how to automatically cycle through each row of the CSV and generate a PDF without watermarks for each one, as you can see that we have here. Okay. So this is the project file that you should be starting off with today. It's basically just taking off from where we left off in the last tutorial, but you can also download a fresh file from underneath this video. The first thing we're going to do is insert the loop action into the flow, which we'll put underneath our select action since that doesn't really need to be repeated. And now I'll drag the load data action and the rest of the actions into it. For the loop type, here, we're going to set this on data rows. What this is going to do is it's going to tell Fuga to repeat the actions once for each row in the CSV. So basically what's going to happen, is that if you have 2 rows, it'll repeat 2 times. If you have 50 rows, it'll repeat 50 times. This way, when you add or take away rows from the spreadsheet, you won't have to modify anything in the flow. It'll automatically adapt to it. For loop variable, I'm going to leave this blank for now, but I'll be coming back to that later. Here I'll type in data.csv with quotes around it, and I'll select relative to current document to tell Fuga to use our data.csv file, the same one we used in the last tutorial, but relative to this document. Here, for the load data action, you probably remember that last time in the last part of this tutorial, I had to go in and change this to row 2 to load row 2 from the CSV, or row 1 to load row 1. What we want it to do here is we want this to automatically update, because we're going to loop through the rows of the CSV and we want it to load data from the first row of the CSV, then the second row of the CSV, and so on each time the loop repeats. The thing about it is, though, is that we can't go in the middle of the flow and change this. We need to find a way to change it automatically. And the way we're going to do that is by using a variable. You probably remember a little bit about variables from math class. If x is equal to 2, then what's x plus 1? To figure out what the answer is, what you're going to do is you're going to check and see what x is equal to, and see that it's equal to 2, and then you're going to replace x in the equation with 2, so you'll get 2 plus 1 instead of x plus 1, and then you'll get 3 for the answer. Variables in Fuga work a similar way. When I'm talking about variables in Fuga, I like to refer to them as containers that store pieces of information. Think about them as little Tupperware containers, but instead of storing, your mom's cookies or something like that, they'll store numbers or dates or strings. And then when it comes time to use the variable, what Fuga will do is it'll actually check and see what's inside the container, and it'll use that. Here, I'll show you exactly how this works. I have a little demo prepared. Basically, here's a demo. I'm going to insert a move action, and let's say that I want to move the box by 20 picas. I'll type in 20 here. Then I play the flow, and it moves by 20 picas, as you can see. Now I'll show you how to do this using a variable. I'll double click here, and I'll just leave that on var1, and I'll change the type to number. For value, I'll put in 20. Now I'll put in var1 here. Now what's going to happen is Fuga is going to check variable 1, so here. It's going to see that its value is 20, and then it's going to insert that into there. So it's basically the same. So now when I move this back and I press play, you can see that it's still moving by 20 units. I can also do things like I can do math in here. I can do plus 20, or here, let's do plus 10. And it'll move it by 10. Sorry, it'll move it by 30 because it's adding a 10 to 20. Now I'll undo it that time. And I'll take off this. And I can also use the same variable in different actions. I can say, I can use a replace text action, which will insert text into a text frame or replace the text in a text frame. And here I can put var1. And now, as you can see, 20, the same value as in here, is getting inserted into there. And it's still moving by 20. I can also change the value of the variable, what's inside the variable, in the middle of the flow. So I can say, use the set action, which will set the value of the variable. Select action there where it belongs. And I'll set this set action. I'll select variable 1 to tell Fuga to set variable 1 as, let's say, 30. So now I'm going to delete this, and when I step through the flow, Fuga is putting 20 in here, which is our default value for variable 1. And now Fuga is going to change the value of variable 1 to 30, which is what I put in here through our set action. And now it's going to move it by 30, which you can see it did. So basically you can change the value of a variable in a flow, and this is very useful, as hopefully you'll come to see later. And so what we want to do through the loop is we want to create a counter. To create a counter, there's a very simple way to create a counter, but I'm going to show you the more complicated way at first, because that way you can kind of see what's going on. So what I'll do is I'll drag my replace text and move actions and my set action into the flow. And now I'll say variable 1 plus 1 for here. What this is going to do is it's going to tell variable 1 to increase by 1 each time the loop is performed. So how can variable 1 be equal to variable 1 plus 1 and variable 1 at the same time? Basically what's going to happen is Fuga is going to check, it's going to check this part of the action first. So it'll first add 1 to variable 1, and then it'll set it back into variable 1. So we want to start this counting off at 0. So I'll change that to 0. Now each time the loop repeats, it's going to start off at 0, and then the set action will increase it to 1. So it'll be 1, and then it'll be 2, and then it'll be 3. This loop is set to numeric, which is the counting loop that we used in the first flow tutorial. So it basically just tells Fuga to repeat this loop 5 times. We're going to also set this, actually I'll come back to the loop variable in a second. So now I'll show you how this works. Step through the flow, and first time the set action is performed, variable 1 is set as 1. And 1 is inserted into here, and it's going to move by 1 pickup. Next time the loop is performed, the set action is going to be performed, and this changes to 2. And now 2 is inserted into there, and it's going to move by 2 picas. And as I play through the flow, it goes on and on and on. Also, in case you forgot, it's moving by picas because that's the units that my document ruler is in, which is how Fuga works with those. So yeah, basically instead of using the set action though, there's a simpler way to do it. This counter functionality is actually built into the loop. So when I set the loop variable as variable 1, Fuga knows to automatically increase variable 1 each time the loop is performed. Fuga knows, counters are very useful when it comes to loops. They're, kind of like bread and butter. They definitely go well together. So, it already has this functionality built in. And you don't have to worry about the set action. In fact, here I'll show you again. As you can see, when I play the flow again, it's doing the exact same thing. So this is exactly what we want to happen for our student ID card flow, so that the data row number will increase each time the loop is performed. So it'll load data from row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on. To do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable, and I'll call it row. And I'll set its type to number. And when I click out, this value is set as 0. This is the default value. This is what, after the flow is performed, it's going to go back to automatically. Now what I'll do is I'll put this, I'll for row, I'll put in row, the variable. So Fuga knows to check the value of row each time the loop is performed, or each time this action is performed. And here, I'll set this loop variable as row as well to tell Fuga to increase row each time the loop is performed.